This is Coach Jason Ballard, and I'm a business wingman. Over the years, I've learned a lot from working in our family construction business, serving as a senior officer in the United States Air Force, and running 12 different organizations around the world. Many people helped me get to where I am today, and it's my mission in life to serve as a personal wingman to others. That's what this podcast is all about, providing knowledge, tools, resources, and mentorship to help people soar to their highest altitude. Welcome back to the Soar Higher podcast. This is your host, Coach Jason Ballard. It's a real privilege to be with you today. We've got yet another awesome, great episode in store for you today. Today, we're going to be talking about something really critical that's going on in the world today. That's actually a real challenge for people down at that grassroots level. Today, we're talking about leadership, how to lead authentically, and communicate where people will follow you anywhere, anytime something needs to be done. Today, we have the privilege of having Tim Fortescue on the show. Let me tell you a few awesome things about Tim. Amazing guy, amazing patriot. He's the founder and CEO of 40 Watt Coaching, which is an executive communications coaching firm that helps leaders lead with authenticity and communicate as effectively as possible. His renowned work has taken him all across the world, over 6 different continents. He has worked with people in this vein and works with the top Fortune 500 companies like Nike, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, just to name a few. It's a real honor to have Tim on the show today. Tim, welcome aboard, man.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
No, we're happy to have you. This is such a great and timely, relevant topic, leadership. With all of the fast-moving things in the world, with politics, with people working from home, people not working from home, going back to work, like with all of the things going on in our economy and the workforce today, we need leadership. And I dare say authentic, genuine leadership in this world more than ever. Um, so thank you for your work. Thank you for the show. Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us about kind of your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. I have always wanted to be a coach. I'm the son of a elementary school teacher, and then my father was worked for the government, but he was always my coach in little league or in the sports I played. And so I always knew I wanted to teach or coach somehow, and I just couldn't quite figure out how to do it for a living. So when I got out of college, after playing basketball at school for years, I thought, all right, I'm gonna coach basketball. I'll teach the game of basketball. And I just need to figure out how to do this for a living. And that wasn't very easy. And quite honestly, I never figured it out. The path to making a living in coaching is to do it at the university level, at a big school, or even a smaller school, or to do it professionally. And I just either didn't make the right moves or couldn't find the right break or didn't have the right guts at the right moment. It just didn't pan out. So my path I took was coaching high school basketball, which, as we said in the pre-show, it paid me about enough to put gas in my tank to get back and forth to practice and not much more. So I always had a day job. I had some really nice day jobs working for companies like Eli Lilly and pharmaceuticals, or worked at the University of Michigan. And I would always duck out of work a little bit early and go coach my basketball team, my varsity or my junior varsity team or whatever it was I was coaching at that time. And so that's a really long day. That's a start your day at 8 or 9, finish your day at 8 or 9 because practice is going right until
Yep.
past dinner time. And around the time I got to my late 30s, I just started thinking, okay, I don't have a family yet, but I want one. My wife and I were starting to think about kids, and I thought, I got to find a better way. This is not sustainable. I'm going to burn out. And serendipitously, I met someone who was a communication coach. I was a student in their workshop, and the person invited me to come train and learn how to be a coach, how to be a coach of communication for companies. And it was like the the best break in the world. I said yes, I jumped at it. This was in 2014. And for the past decade, I've been a communication coach specializing in executive leadership. I started my own company during the pandemic, my own firm. So this is year 4 of doing it on my own. And I really do feel like I'm living the dream.
Nice. Well, one thing definitely stands out, with you, Tim, and that is you're a very passionate guy and you're very passionate about people and growth and them, continuously learning and evolving and seeing them be successful, whether you're coaching basketball or executives in a boardroom, like seeing people grow and learn and develop is powerful. How did you ever develop that passion? Like what happened in your life that like sparked that to where you just want to give on those kind of levels?
Yeah, that's a good question. As I'm hearing your question, I'm reflecting back to the people who did that for me. I can think about a coach in my life I remember my JV basketball coach. When I was coming through high school,
Mm.
was one of those first few people that I felt like really believed in me. And I lacked confidence as a kid, and I just felt like I needed somebody. It was awesome to have somebody in my corner, somebody that believed in me that I could do it, and how much courage and I don't know just how much that gave me to have somebody feel like, yeah, I believe in you. And I think it was that feeling that I realized how much it meant to me and how much I wanted to give it back to others. That's probably where it started.
I can certainly relate, man, and that I think a lot of people can relate to that. I think, there's always somebody in somebody's life that makes a difference. Like they just ask a question, they go to lunch with them, they give them a few minutes of their time and see things in people. I remember when I first started out in the Air Force, um there was one particular guy, his name is Thomas Glenn. He was a colonel, and he just saw something in me that I darn sure didn't see in myself. And he said, "Hey, let's go to lunch. Let's talk about some things with you." And that conversation changed everything. I was planning just to serve a couple of years, get in, get out, do my thing, move on to something different. And it completely opened my eyes up to something that I never even noticed. And it took me in a completely different direction, and how powerful, how impactful that can be, that, this particular person took an interest in you that changed your life, it sounds like.
It's true, and thanks for sharing that story because that's what it's all about. It's that how much of a difference we can make in the life of someone else.
Yeah.
Just by being positive and telling them what you see as possible for them. It made such a difference in that moment in sports. But I remember I had a college professor that played a similar role when I got into college, and did the same thing for me there. I was an English major, and in high school, I was like a so student.
Yeah.
But I came in freshman year and I kind of lacked confidence in my writing and was taking the 101 English class. And this professor told me he saw something in the first assignment I had. And he said something. He was one of the tough old school guys, but he kind of said a compliment in there that I might have some potential or something like that. And I was like, really? You see that in me? And it just took off. I became an English major, not just at that one moment, but he and I ended up developing a great relationship over the years I was there. And I became an English major, and a lot of it was not a lot of it, all of it was because of this one person
Yeah.
believing in me.
Man, that's what it's about. It's about learning. It's about growing, and then it's about mentoring, and then it's about you doing the same thing for other people, right? You take the lessons that you've learned through the people that have come and gone in your life, and then pass that on so the next group of people around you can take that and take something in the world that um, is at a certain place that's better than when you got it, and they take it over and make it better themselves. And I think if we all thought about things a little bit more like that, I think the world would continue to evolve into a better and better place. And so that takes courage, though. That takes willingness to see something and to give away your greatest asset that you can give to people, which is your time. Giving somebody your time to recognize something, to make a note of something, and then communicate that to them authentically is powerful. And we're in a day and an age right now where everybody's so busy, there's so many things changing so rapidly that I see declines in leadership. Leaders are taking kind of the easy way out sometimes and just making the excuse, I'm busy to invest in you, busy to, mentor you, busy to take you to lunch, busy, to do whatever. And I think we've created some things in the workforce where the result of that is people aren't staying. They're not putting up with things. They wanna be developed. They wanna go to places where people see value and appreciate them, right? And see them as leaders that they wanna follow, and if people don't see you as a leader that they can follow for at least a number of years, they're not staying. So I wanted to get your perspective about the workforce and things like that you're seeing and those challenges around that, and kind of how that kind of led you to get into what you're doing now.
Really well said, the way you put that, Jason. And I think what I'm reflecting about as I heard you say it is at its core, leadership is about connection.
Yeah.
And that's what led me to do that's what has led me to try to become a basketball coach. Did it for quite a few years. The reason I coach people now, the reason I'm excited to get up in the morning and work with people, it's to build connection, to help others build better connection, and to start to spread the thing that you and I are talking about right now.
So let's talk about leadership. You're coaching leaders all around the world to be authentic, to be genuine, and to communicate and bring yourself to the table, to the boardroom, to the workplace in a very particular way. So how do you define authentic leadership? What is your definition of that so everybody can get on the same page with you here?
Starts off with the notion that many people, many leaders, many people who've been successful have built up a different persona at work. Yeah, they've got a work persona and it's something that they think they should emulate. Maybe they're emulating somebody that they looked up to or admired. And that's actually not the right way to be. It's the way to be is the way to you are with your closest friends and family. If your team saw you at work with your family or your close friends, they should feel some sense of, yeah, that's you. That's who this person is through
Yeah.
and through, because the two are similar. And if you're feeling like you as a leader are something else, it's okay. You're not bringing all of you to work every day, but 75%, yeah, 75 should be pretty close. And so I just look at it as simply, is somebody showing up the way that they do in the majority sense at home or with their friends and family, the people that they're most comfortable with? Are they doing that at work too?
Yeah. How do you know if you're an authentic leader or not? If you get up, go to work, go into your place of business or whatever organization you're in, and you're listening to this podcast, like, am I an authentic leader? Or am I not? I a lot of people don't stop and think about these things. They're just busy doing what they're doing. They got a title, they got a position, they make money, they do their thing. How do you know whether you're authentic leader or not? Are there signs or are there things going on that you can, pick up on, or assessments, or how do you do that?
Certainly, yeah, there's all the above. But if I were to cut right to the core of what would be the biggest thing, if somebody's asking themselves, am I showing up authentically? Am I leading with authenticity? It comes down to, what are your core values? And
Mm,
are you clear on them? Are you in touch with them? Are you connected? Are you connected to yourself? And I know this kind of sounds kind of silly, but like you mentioned earlier in our conversation, the world moves fast right now. Your most
yep.
precious resource is time, and our time is being pulled constantly. It is so easy in the world we're living in right now to become disconnected from yourself and those core values. And so when I work with a client, that's the first thing we're working on is starting to uncover what makes you you. What are those core values? Those things that if they're not respected or if those core things are stepped on, it really bothers you. That can be a way to start to identify what they are. It's like when you get really agitated, something really, really bothers you, it's probably because something really important was not honored or respected inadvertently, usually by
Yeah.
somebody. But it's let's figure out some ways to identify what those core values are for you. And then just spend some time reflecting on, am I consistently leading with these? Are these a part of my
Yeah.
everyday? And if not, let's make some adjustments.
Yeah. So just to clarify, when you say core values, boy, that can go in a number of different directions. This, I think, if I'm understanding it right from your perspective, this is not about your company's core values. Hey, we're about safety first, we're about integrity, and we're about teamwork. Like that's great. We're not talking about company core values. We're talking about personal core values inside of your heart, your soul that make you tick, what's most important to you, right?
That is 100% correct. Yeah, and that's such a I'm
Okay.
glad you distinguished it. There's the company core values, which you see the mission statement, and those words are in conference rooms and things like that. And then there's a set for you. And so an example would be, Jason, in just the few minutes you and I have talked, I think there's probably a core value of service within you. Does that resonate with you?
Absolutely. Yeah, in fact, if you go to my website, I've got my values out there. My company values, being in the coaching business, they're hiring me. They're not hiring necessarily the company because coaching's personal, like right? When you coach people, if they don't like you, they're not hiring you, right? So mine are the same, right? But yes, service is number 4. Service before self, service to people and their needs above yours. So their needs above anything else, right? Delivering outstanding service to them on a high level to help them get where they're trying to be. For me, how about you, Tim? What are some of your core values?
That's one of them too, and I think that's
Yeah,
why we're both drawn to the coaching profession. That's why as a 20 something and 30 earlier 30 something, I was spending extra hours in a gymnasium with teenagers for free basically as I was honoring that value of service and that is I want to try to help somebody else be better. So
yeah,
to me that is it's if it's not the top of my list, it's pretty close.
yeah. Well, let's kind of break this down even more. Why do how did well let me go back and ask you another question. We talked about what an authentic leader may be, maybe some of the characteristics, their values, and kind of being true to that as they, weave in and out of their daily activities of home, work, and everything in between. What makes somebody not authentic? How do you know if you're not authentic?
Yeah, a quick way to measure that is are do you if you're being honest with yourself, are you following some other blueprint? Are you being someone that you're not? And
Mm,
it's hard to realize, but I remember a client came to me last year and said, "Yeah, I want to work on my communication and my executive presence." And I said, "Okay, well, what does executive presence mean to you?" And I remember she said, "Well, it's like this one executive that we have at our company that does this and does that." And she just started describing someone else. And so the goal was, I want to be like this person.
mm,
It's okay to want to emulate aspects of someone else that you admire. Like that's totally fine. That's a good way to grow in certain ways. But the core of it's got to be you. If it's you to the core of it, and then I like this way this one person does this, I want to pick up that trick or that tip, like that works for me. That works for people for leaders. But if it's the other way around, if it's I'm trying to be something I'm not, then that's where it doesn't work. I'll give you one
yeah.
more quick example of it. Going back to basketball coaching, when I was in my early mid 20s and I think I got my first ever head coaching job. I was a ninth grade coach at a Catholic school in Detroit, near where I grew up, and in Metro Detroit. I remember I thought my college coach was the best coach ever, so I was just going to be like him. And he was fiery, and he was rah rah rah, and he was he was almost like a larger than life figure. And sure, I can have a little bit of that in me, but I'm actually kind of an introvert. So I was
Mm.
trying to be him. And as I look back at myself in that period, I was like, man, I wish I had a do-over, because I could have been so much more impactful for those kids if I would have just been myself, which is probably the biggest thing I developed and changed in those 12 years I was a basketball coach. As I got deeper into it, I just let go of what I thought I should be, and I just was myself.
That is a very important point. I want to talk more about that, right? There's a term that's floating around out there a lot called imposter syndrome. And a lot of leaders, kind of use that and wonder if that's them. And sometimes they are doing imposter kind of things, and they deny it, or they don't know what it is. But that is a big term being kicked around, the imposter syndrome. So when you think about somebody that's trying to emulate somebody else, and I'm just going to model there. I like Colin Powell. I had a chance to spend time with him when he was alive back in the military days. And man, he's a great guy. He's just magnetic. He's just got very special things about him that make him unique, and people draw to him, and he's just a revered leader in America. But the challenge with that of modeling somebody and trying to be like them is that what I have found, I want to get your take on this, Tim, is you model somebody, but then when something doesn't go well and a crisis erupts or some major issue happens, and your natural instincts kick in and you start cracking under pressure, like eventually the real you comes out in some kind of, at some point, at some time. And then you confuse people, like, oh, you were Colin Powell today, and then the day before you were Jason. Like got all upset about something a minute ago, and now you're trying to be like Colin Powell today. Like, who are you? Like, and I think in leadership, one of the most important things you need to think about is consistency. How can you be consistent if you're emulating other people? How do you see this a lot? What do you think about that?
Yeah, completely. And I keep pulling away from work examples, because the first one that popped into my mind here is me as a parent. I
Yeah.
mean, I am consistently imperfect as a parent. And my daughters, I've got two
Aren't we
young
all?
daughters, 6 years old and 3 years old, and I screw up all the time, but I am consistent. I screw up, and when I know I catch myself screw up, I tell them I did. But they also know what's important to me. They know the things that we emphasize are what's important. And I'm also realizing that I'm modeling to them that, when I screw something up, like, here's how you apologize, or here's how you own that. And it's not always the other person's fault. Even the authority figure, your dad, is wrong a lot. So
Yeah.
that's what flashed to me, and I think there's a complete crossover to the way I managed teams when I was leading teams, the way I coached my basketball team, also the way I work through scenarios with leaders that I'm coaching, in terms of, like, how do you show up? How do you show up in this consistent way? But in a dynamic world where things are changing all the time, you can be consistent, but you're going to screw up plenty of times. So can you consistently own that?
So I'm curious, when you're coaching people to be better leaders, how do you get them comfortable in their own skin?
The core values. We start
Yeah.
to identify, what are you like when you feel at your strongest, when you feel frictionless. I've had clients describe it to me as they feel light and airy when things are moving, frictionless. And I
Mm.
start off by having them tell me about some times where you feel that way. What was true about it? What was going on? What was the energy you feel? Describe the energy. As many labels and names as we can get for that feeling of when they're flowing, just clicking. Things are clicking.
Yeah.
Decisions are being made clearly. I'm being true to my values. I'm floating through my day, and the more we can label it, the better, because then we can use those terms to come back and say, okay, well, through that energy or through that perspective, how do you want to look at this situation?
Mm.
Or, and it sounds kind of out there, but in the coaching discipline, the coactive coaching discipline, which is what I'm trained in and certified in, I'll ask them to step into that energy metaphorically, or actually even in a Zoom meeting. Get up, stand up, move over here. Let's say you're now in it. Step right into that type of energy, that light, airy feeling. And how do you want to look at this issue now? What wisdom is coming to you as you step into, I call it your inner leader. Stepping into your inner leader. What's your inner leader telling you right now? I'll pause there in case there's probably some stuff
Yeah.
to unpack in what I just said.
No, no, that was awesome. And your inner leader, talk to us a little bit more about that. What is the inner leader? Is that like your gut feeling? Is that something where you feel better about something than something else? Like, what is the inner leader? How do you know you're in concert with this inner leader? You make the inner leader seem like a good thing where you need to be.
It's a great question to double click on, and it is your gut feeling. It's your gut feeling when you feel like you're leading by your own values. And everybody can usually identify that moment. Like, think of a time where you felt like you were making decisions that were true to who you are.
Mm,
And whatever, however, I can channel that part of you where you're feeling frictionless, you're feeling um, at purpose, intentional about the things you're doing, you're happy, you're light. Those kind of terms keep coming up. We've all got that within us. And the terminology that in the coactive coaching world, we call it your inner leader. And that's the place you want to operate from as often as possible. But
yeah,
you can't operate there if you haven't identified it. And so
yeah.
sometimes it takes coaching. It certainly takes reflection, maybe journaling, introspection to get there, and then bring it out more often.
Yeah. I've noticed a lot of leaders aren't even really confident. They haven't identified, nor are they confident in their style, their leadership style, their own unique thing. They take a few things over here from what they saw in a boss, they take a few things over here from some movie star they like, or they take things from different parts of the world and they kind of put those things in their toolbox and it helps them build out who they are. And there's always good takeaway. I took some stuff away from Colin Powell. I took stuff away from a lot of people, some of the good and the bad, of what not to do and stuff too, right? You learn equally from that as well, but you still have to get into your own leadership mojo of being confident and comfortable who you are leading and know your leadership style, because when people challenge you, when people go against you, when people are confused or you're in the middle of a chaotic situation, you can still toe the line and cut right through that and stay disciplined in that space. Um, how do you help people do some of those kinds of things, Tim?
I think about this conversation I had earlier this morning. I was working with a client. Her name's Liz, works at a tech company, a leader at a prominent company. And the task that she was faced with is helping the company move with more speed and agility. And every company wants to go faster and
Yeah,
work better. But how do you do it? How do you do it in a world where people are burning out at a regular basis? People can't shut off because their work is on their phone, which is with them all the time. They can't be present as much as they used to with their families because they're not leaving work at the office. The office might be in their house. So how do you we all want to go faster and work better, of course. But how do you do it? And so where we got in our work together is what really matters to her is how we treat each other. And so she started
mm,
boiling it down, talking about her inner leader. What her inner leader was speaking loudly as we started to get into it. And it was, in order to work faster and smarter, you got to help people feel appreciated. And so
mm,
how do we quantify helping people feel appreciated? It is, this and this and this. And then it was the next step was, well, people have got to feel that their work matters and there's got to be some level of fulfillment. And then it was, a couple more things in that realm. And then the last piece out of four major pieces we worked on was we want to exceed our goals and have great performance. It was like performance was last. The fuel
Yeah.
to all of it is, making an environment where people love showing up,
Yeah.
want to be there. And they're happy to be there. They're eager to be there because they're valued. They know their work matters and they get fulfillment.
Yeah. Do you feel or do you see, Tim, out there in the world when you're dealing with leaders and their people where people will get bogged down in the day to day, and they will come to a point where like all the battery juice is drained. You talked about burnout and people just overdoing it, and how that impacts the work environment. But isn't being a leader the ability to recognize how much people how much gas people have in their tank? Because people, different kind of cars on the road have different sized tanks. Different people have different tanks and have different capabilities. But so isn't leadership about knowing the size of those gas tanks and then how to refill those tanks?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is a more colorful metaphorical way of saying one size doesn't fit all in leadership.
Yeah.
And that a good leader, the best leaders, can flex different styles, can be how about this? The best leaders listen. And it doesn't always mean listen to what people are saying, but they're aware. They're listening, they're
Yeah.
observing what's going on, and they're flexing to do what's needed for everybody on the team as often as they need to do it. Does that sound
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I love that. I love, and I love that the way you put that, listening. Most feel like, "Oh, I'm sitting down in front of Tim today and I'm asking a question, I'm listening to his answer." Yeah, that's great, but listening could also mean just watching, observing, the nonverbals, the body language. They don't come to work on time for 4 weeks in a row, right? They're sending messages, they're communicating, which is different ways we listen and communicate. And so I wanted to kind of pivot into the communication piece. We talked about the authenticity of leadership. You're a leadership coach, you are a communications coach. What do you think some of the biggest challenges leaders have with communication?
The higher you go in an organization, the more pressure there is to get it right. So, for
Yeah.
example, when somebody's an individual contributor, ground level, or just not a people manager, it could be very senior, but the scope of what they're doing is defined. They're talking to people, communicating with people, but the scope is more narrow. They become a people manager, a director, a vice president, a C-suite. As leaders gain scope, the ability to get it right, to know what you're talking about, to be the expert of it, all of that is difficult. And then the different constituencies you're speaking to increase. You're not speaking to one team that does this one function. You're speaking to, in often cases, you're speaking to constituencies that do all kinds of different stuff. You might be speaking to
Mm,
the whole company, so every different job function. And you're trying to thread the needle of all the things we're talking about. You're trying to be empathetic. You're trying to show that you understand what they need. You're also trying to be credible. Make sure that they know that you're the right person to be there, because they're maybe dealing with their own degree of imposter syndrome too. So it is so challenging to do all that consistently and do it in an authentic way. So I think I've thrown just about every pain point in the world of communication in that answer, but I think we got it covered.
So what are some of the common mistakes leaders make when they're communicating? How does the communication break down? Where does that cause them the most problem?
One of the most common areas is, I call it, you'll love this one based on your aviation experience, but I call it your altitude level. It's
Hmm.
how much, like how high and how broad do you need to go in order to get your message across, or how detailed and specific do you need to go? A lot of my clients are tech companies. So we're talking about a technical leader oftentimes, or this doesn't even need to be a tech company. It could be any organization where someone is communicating something that's complicated. It's thinking about, who is my audience? What level of altitude do they need from me? Do they need to be right into the nitty gritty details, data, or should I come at this broader? more general terms with story, with metaphor. What do I need to do? But that missing of the audience's altitude level that they require, that's one of the most common gaps I see.
Yeah, I do too in my practice. Um, there's something that I use called omnidirectional communications, right? So let's say you're a director in a Fortune 500 company, right? You communicating up to the VP or the C-suite people is significantly, at least it should be significantly different than communicating to somebody that's on the front lines that may work for you or work in another part of the company that's in a lower level role, right? Which is also different than communicating with your peers at the same director level. That you've got to what I see are people get lost. They try to communicate with everybody the same way, and a lot of times that just doesn't work. How do you coach your people through those kinds of things? I think that's a real issue for people today, isn't it?
Completely. Yeah. And I empathize with them too, because thinking about a senior leader that's their calendar goes from meeting with my direct reports to meeting with someone for an interview, a job interview to join my team, to maybe a media interview, to then I'm going to talk to the whole company at an all hands meeting, to it's just thing after thing. Each
Yep.
audience is so drastically different than the last. It is not an easy tightrope to walk. So the way I work on that is we stop and I'd say, who are you speaking to? And what is the one thing you want them to walk away with?
Nice.
And usually, even if it's super technical stuff, there's a really simple statement. And so it's like, okay, remember how simple that statement is. Now, how are we going to communicate that for this particular audience? And then I've got some prompts, some questions,
Yeah.
not nothing super like mind blowing in terms of questions, but just thinking about what does this audience need? What's their understanding of this topic? Just to help us gauge
Yeah.
the altitude level and things like that.
So talk about the process. So if I was, a leader at the C-suite level, and I was, maybe more introverted, and I was more challenged with my communication skills. Um, and I hired you to help me be a better communicator, i.e. a better leader. What's that process that you would take me through? How long does that take? What kind of things do we work on? And to kind of give us an idea of what that looks like.
First, I'd start off by asking you about your goals, and that's going to be different. But there are themes generally that if somebody's coming to me for improving communication as a leader. They're generally themes, and they're going to fall into one of the main buckets usually. And those are things like, uh, at, at the core, it's confidence. Increasing my confidence, overcoming my imposter syndrome, although they may not
Yeah.
show up using that terminology. It may be I want more influence. I want to be seen as a credible leader. It's it usually comes down to how do I perceive myself or how do others perceive me as the things that are on people's minds when they come to me. And then communication is just the vehicle for which we're accomplishing those things or not accomplishing them. So I start off with goals and understanding the person. And then usually across the board, I'm starting with an area, I just call it finding your authentic voice.
Hmm.
And I do it really simply. And then we work on it a lot of different ways. But the way we do it, and for any listener who's of the podcast who's thinking, how can I do this? Here's what I do. I'll give you a little free coaching for the audience. I have them take out their smartphone and record themselves talking for 30 seconds about their current number one priority at work. Like, number one, the North Star right now for the organization or for my team is what? And I want you to just communicate it directly to your phone, your smartphone, video selfie, so you can see it. And then when that's done, I want them to record a second video. And the second video is I want them to talk about someone that's important in their life. I've had people talk about their spouse, their best friend, a family member, or a pet. I've even had. It doesn't matter at all who it is. It's just that there has to be a feeling about the person or
Yep.
pet that they're speaking about. And then what I want them to do is look at those two videos back to back, and we do it together. And I usually this is what we see broadly. We see in the first video, the work video, we see seriousness. We see sometimes openly they feel pressure to get it right, to get the right words, to do it within the right time parameter that I gave them. There's pressure and it's not super fun. There's exceptions to that, but that's usually. Then the second one, what we see is they don't care how long the time goes. They go over almost every time. They just start telling a story. We start to see vocal variety, meaning there's no monotone. There's a sense of warmth or there's a feeling behind it, even if
Yeah.
it's subtle. We start to see the body language change. There's more movement. There's more facial gesture variety, face
Yeah.
expression variety. So we see, and sometimes it's like stark contrast, sometimes it's subtle, but across the board, even for like really good communicators that do both of these well, what we see is in the second video where they're just telling a story about something they care about, we see that that's the one that they want to show up. They want to show up in that version more often.
Yep. Wow, that's a really cool exercise. I like that. Very simple. And I think simplicity is key. When I talk to leaders a lot, they've got so many things going on. I see this all the time, almost every week. Your two best friends in leadership are clarity and simplicity. So I love how you can simplify that, break that down, and show them that. And it's powerful to see that replay. The best quarterbacks, the Tom Brady's, the Peyton Mannings, are the best quarterbacks mainly because they watch a lot of film and they see themselves, critique themselves, and they see their opponents, and they self-evaluate in a very critical, positive manner that will allow them to identify their areas where they can be better. And a lot of times we don't even know what we're doing until somebody points it out to us.
Agreed. And you said something in a positive way. You threw that in into how we can critique ourselves or self-evaluate. That is so important because many people's first impression when we do any kind of recording activity is they want to nitpick what was wrong or they're ready for me to give them the negative stuff.
Yeah,
And I also see a correlation that the more successful someone is, it's almost they're even tougher. They're ready
yep,
for like, give it to me, just give me the hard news. And
yep,
I'm going to surprise you here, and I actually am going to focus way more on what I think you're doing well because I think that's more important. We'll
yeah,
address the gap areas too, but in that example of like seeing two different variations of your speaking, there really isn't a right or wrong. It's not that I'm saying the first version is wrong. I just want you to have awareness that when I throw a topic at you that you're very ready and prepared to tell me because you're thinking about your North Star at work all the time, that's how you might sound in a meeting. Then this is how you sound if you're telling a story about something that your heart is really into. So it's
yeah,
like, okay, what's the takeaway here? It's not that one is bad and one is good. It's usually that I want a blend of these two.
yep,
That's the ideal state.
yeah, yeah. I think that's important to get people to see the whole dynamic, not just parts and pieces and nitpicking yourself apart. Every time we take pictures with the family or whatever, we're goofing around. My wife gets because she'll nitpick. She see herself in a oh, I didn't know I had that wrinkle there, and she's very critical of things. So she doesn't like people taking My youngest daughter, who's 15, takes pictures of her all the time, puts them on Snapchat, and she gets upset about it because she's super critical of those things. It's easy for us all to just zone in when we're looking at ourselves. So I think that's really a great way for you to take people through that process in a very friendly, positive manner. And so, Tim, great episode, man. I think you just got so much stuff to offer, and we've packed so much in a short amount of time. As we start kind of concluding today's episode, what do you think the top couple of things are that you would wanna leave people? I'm gonna kinda give you a dose of your own medicine. Out of everything we've talked about today, what are the most important things you want people to leave with that you want them to think about as far as their communication, their leadership, the authenticity behind it that can help them the most today?
Let's start where you and I started, Jason, and that is I'd like everybody who's listening to this to pause if you haven't already reflected on this and think about the people in your life, maybe the coworkers you have, or maybe it's somebody in your family or your kids, your friend. I just want you to think, is there somebody in your life that you see something that they may not see in themselves in a good way.
Hmm.
And I want you to take the action, send them a message, call them, let them know, because the impact of a lot of people spreading a little bit of positivity to one another is, I don't know. I feel like that's a good flywheel to get moving in the world.
Yeah.
So to go back to the first thing you talked about, where it was your instructor or my instructor, or just let's pay that one forward if we can. The next one is, if you want to be a better communicator, it comes down to really simple things that you can probably work on for the rest of your life, but they're at the core, they're simple. And that is, great communication equals helping an audience see what you're saying, feel what you're saying, understand what you're saying, and then be able to take action on what you're saying. So I'll repeat
Hmm.
that one more time. Great communication equals see it, feel it, understand it, take action. A little bit more within each of those. Help your audience see it means use a metaphor. Describe the idea in a way that's a little unique, a little bit different. And that helps it be memorable.
Hmm.
Feel it. Add a story to the point you're trying to make. That's where the emotional connection starts to happen. Understand it is put the audience first. Think about the big questions they may have on their mind, sort of like, what is it? What is the thing that you're asking me to do? Why is this thing important? And then how will this thing work? If you can answer just those very basic questions, your audience has a much greater chance of understanding what it is that you're trying to convey. And that last piece is, make sure they can take action on it. And how do you do that? It's think before you communicate. What is the one action step I want them to do? What's the action I'd like for them to take? And if there isn't one, then maybe that's not something that even needed to be communicated. But usually in most interactions, there is that action step, and make it clear for where people should start.
Awesome advice. I love it. Folks, you got some just outstanding free coaching session today by one of the great coaches out there in authentic leadership, in authentic communication. As they say, it's not about what you say or what you do. People remember how you make them feel. And I think if you take Tim's, advice today on this podcast, it can make a real difference for you that will last, the rest of your life. And so, Tim, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being so open and honest and providing all of this great, wonderful advice that folks can take and start using today. Tim, if they want to know more, if they want to get to know you better, want to, potentially work with you in the things that you're doing to improve themselves, how do they get in touch with you? What's the best way?
Probably the best way is follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn or reach out that way. That's where most of my new content comes out. I'll share thoughts and posts a few times a week usually. And my name is Tim Fortescue. It's probably in the show notes, but its last
Yep.
name is spelled Fortescue. That's the best. And then the other way is check out my website, which is 40wattcoaching.com. It's 40watt coaching.com.
Awesome. We're also, as Tim mentioned, we're going to put that in the show notes as we always do, so you can always have a way to connect back to Tim and ask him some more questions, get to know him a little bit better. Tim, thank you so much, folks. That's it for today's show. Definitely don't want to miss next week's show. We've got another awesome guest in store for you that's doing some amazing things to help people in very unique ways. You do not want to miss next week's show. Everybody, have a great week.